You know, in pediatrics, looking where dairy is such a major problem, it's been estimated that, you know, one of the major problems children have, it's a universal problem, especially those who drink milk, is constipation. Constipation is like heartburn and hemorrhoids. If somebody else has it, it doesn't seem like such a big deal until it affects your life. Then it can significantly affect your quality of life. And some research would suggest that constipation is a major problem in young children, and that it can basically, for the most part, be solved if dairy is excluded from a child's diet. And yet so many parents don't understand this or are confused by it, again, as a consequence of such effective, deceptive marketing over decades, really, by the dairy industry. And the government's complicity with this advertising, allowing people to, well, for years they had it as a major food group in the Canada Food Guide, which is shocking, because the science would clearly show, and has shown for many decades, that dairy is a toxic food. And it's particularly toxic in children because of their sensitivities to it. So let's take common conditions in children. Constipation, majorly contributed by dairy products. Exact mechanism, some are known, some are not. Dairy tends to cause, amongst many things, an inflammatory autoimmune type reaction on the inside of the bowel, which tends to contribute to constipation in kids. We've had a number of kids here, kids of adult patients here, who had, for example, issues like bedwetting. Another issue that if you don't have bedwetting, it's not that big deal, but when it affects you or your children, it can have a major impact on quality of life. So we had one patient whose daughter had seen 3 or 4 top-notch urologists in Toronto, throughout a number of different hospitals, for this 10 and 11-year-old child who continued to have bedwetting. It was extremely embarrassing for the child and for the parents, and she could never go over to sleepovers, and it affected her socialization. And urologists checked her out, could find no abnormality, and she heard my lecture one day about dairy and its global impact on human health, and especially in pediatrics. And they went home and tried it and got her off dairy. And for the first time in her whole life, she actually, within 2 weeks, had no further trouble with bedwetting whatsoever. And it was quite extraordinary, actually, really, that nobody had looked at the fact that dairy, amongst other things, in this particular child, almost certainly was causing an inflammatory reaction in her genitourinary tract, which was causing this overflow incontinence that this child had. And nobody had the thought of, maybe you should get dairy out of this child's diet. So the mother came back to me and was profusely so happy that she'd heard me talk about this and brought dairy as a possible culprit. We've had dozens of patients whose asthma control significantly improved, who went from regular daily requirements for inhaled corticosteroids and oral steroids during flare-ups to now having had an asthma attack since they switched to a plant-based diet and got off the dairy products. We had one lady, a 90-year-old lady, fellow Newfoundlander, who had psoriasis in her scalp for 50 years. She joined our Lunch and Learn program. See, it's never too late. And after 3 months, for the first time in her life, she was psoriasis-free after 50 years. So in terms of joint disease, I mean, a lot of people, their joints swelling, their joint pain significantly improve when they go to a plant-based diet. Is that due to reduction in oil consumption? Is it due to elimination of dairy or elimination of chicken? Chicken tends to be another factor that we find. Even when people get off the red meat and go plant-based and still continue to have joint problems, I'll ask them a little more detail about their diet, and they say, well, we do have chicken, you know, once or twice a week. When they focus on getting rid of chicken, a lot of times their joint complaints will improve as well. So it's so far-reaching, the sickness that's been caused by food. Every day I kind of discover a new area that once people get off the toxic animal-based foods, they seem to improve in ways that I never even knew they had a problem. So it's quite extraordinary, actually. Apart from the diabetes and the vascular issues and the obvious blood pressure issues and the blood sugar and the weight, many of other conditions that people have, some of which have not even been diagnosed, seems to get better. So it's sort of like when people finally start feeling better, they didn't realize how sick they were before they changed their nutritional habits.